Hello and welcome to Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and right next to me is my lovely co-host, the Chattering Teacup.
Hello.
And here with us from lovely France, crime fiction author Katherine Graham. Hello Katherine and welcome at Book Lovers Companion.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me.
It's lovely to have you on our show. And I said from France. You're not originally from France. You are from Northumberland.
No, I'm here. I am. I'm from the northeast of England. I'm actually from a town called Gateshead. I'm here temporarily on the house sitting mission.
Yeah, like we said before we started the recording, Life Under the Paw. Yep. We are here to talk about your book or books, the Sea House Mystery Series. Book 3 came out in May this year. And the other ones, Salt Sisters, came out in 2021 and Salted Earth in 2022. What can you tell us about, or not just us, also our listeners, about book number 3, Salt Girl?
Salt Girl, I suppose almost the title came first because I had decided to include salt in the title of the first two books. So I was sort of tied to it, I guess, by the third. And I was exploring the idea of having the victim, the murder victim, having the body buried in salt. Mm-hmm. And I asked a friend, I have a friend who's a scientist, and I asked her what would happen to a body if you buried it in salt, mm-hmm. because I thought either it would be preserved or I don't know, I'm not sure what happens. And she said, let me go away and think about it. And she came back to me a few days later with about 4 pages of research that she'd done. And it was a lot about the tradition and the customs of people burying their deceased in salt, and some different cultures from around the world, and that inspired some of the story. But I already had kind of a good idea of where I wanted it to go. Of course, I already knew my characters, mm-hmm. and I already knew my beautiful setting, which makes life a lot easier. And the characters that drive the plot a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Teacup, go on.
Why use salt in the first place in all the titles?
While I was writing my second, it was a decision that I made at that time, and I was really I'd never planned to write a series. I wrote Salt Sisters and then got quite distracted in another book, which was the first book. You always have the book that you always wanted to write, and a lot of people were coming back to me and saying, "Oh, you should write a prequel, mm-hmm. or a sequel. Write another book in this series." Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who know Northumberland and love Northumberland very much appreciated the first book, mm-hmm. and I think that made me then think, okay, I should maybe make this into a little series, not a big series, just 3 books. And there was a moment where I thought, well, at least if I give them all something similar in the title, then it ties them all together, it links them, mm-hmm. but hopefully not too much. I'm not sure if it was the right thing to do. It does occasionally trip me up, even I get confused. But they're standalones as well, so it's not as if they have to be read in order. So I think that helps it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Because I have to say, shame on me, I've only read book number 3 so far, YouTube, Tika. But
well, that means you have the other 2 to look forward to.
Exactly. And I will read them, I promise, because I absolutely loved Salt Girl. Although, like we established, I am completely useless as an investigator. You said you knew the characters. Did you also know the victim?
The victim in this book was mm-hmm. a new character. She was not in the previous mm-hmm. 2 books, the first 2 books. And I did sit down at the start and kind of plot it all out and figure out who this person was and what had happened to her that resulted in her being buried in a salty grave.
What I found interesting is the fact that in this book, I think it is the DI that calls them local busybodies. Our two of the main characters, Izzy or Isabel and Diana, they are a very unlikely duo to investigate this crime.
I love that though. I love that. That was, and that's sort of half the point. Also, I didn't grow up in sea houses, but I did grow up in a small town, and my parents had a holiday property mm-hmm. close to sea houses. So I spent a lot of time there, and I loved small towns and the kind of the small town mentality, and you can end up becoming extraordinarily friendly with people who are completely unlike you because you're thrown together just by virtue of where you live and where you are. But I love those two characters. I especially love Diana. She's one of my most favorite people in the world. And she's a joy to write. I love kind of her dialogue. I love how she thinks.
Yeah, she's an elderly lady, a retired teacher. And like you said, you love writing her. Funnily enough, authors often love to write the elderly because they are allowed to say whatever they like.
They have more freedom.
Yes. And Diana is a particularly cheeky and audacious 84-year-old. So she knows it as well. She knows that she can get away with things because she's so much older and revered because she was an educator.
Yeah.
And I love that as well.
Yeah.
I love that about her. The character was sort of based on a friend's grandmother. Mm-hmm. And I'd never actually met this lady, but I'd heard all these stories about her and the quips, the things she used to say, the sort of jokes she would make at other people's expense, and her quick wit, her sharp humor, and that kind of inspired a lot of Diana.
I just wonder, are older people from some generation ago, are they more witty, or is it just the age that makes them more witty than the younger ones?
I think with Diana as well, she's quite intelligent. Mm-hmm. But definitely there's something about older people that they just don't care so much, perhaps. I don't know. I think definitely humor was once a lot more sophisticated, perhaps, than it is now.
Yeah, without swear words and such.
Yes, when you didn't maybe have crude language to rely on. God, I sound like a Victorian. But you didn't have those, the 4-letter words, and you had to be far more sophisticated with your insults.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. She's absolutely adorable and awe-inspiring, and nobody dares to say no to her.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be a wonderful position to be in life?
Oh yes, yep. Oh yes. We can aspire to that, can't we, Teacup? I mean, the hair color is already there, so maybe one day.
No, she's quite. I think the word people would use would be formidable.
Yeah,
this is the sort of the character description.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in all your 3 books, some of the main characters are people that went away from sea houses and often thought never to return, but in the end they come back. And on the other hand, it's such a lovely village in a way. Why did they want to come back? Didn't they want to come back?
Well, I think that's probably a little reflection on me in that I'm from a small town, and growing up there, I couldn't wait to get away. I thought, I want to travel the world. I want to live in London, in Paris, in New York. I learned languages. I really thought the whole world is out there. It's not here. Whereas then a lot of my school friends, they've married boys from school, they stayed in the village. And now when I go back there, I think, wow, this is a really lovely place. It's very beautiful. The people are wonderful. Generally people in the northeast of England have a reputation for being very friendly. It's a great community. And now as I get older, sometimes I think, it wouldn't have been such a bad life, perhaps. But so Izzy definitely has that, and that probably came from me.
It's also a sort of homecoming for her in the course of the book. I mean, she struggles with the fact that she is back, and she constantly wonders, why am I not in, like she was before, in Hong Kong or New York, and why I'm here? Because, like you said, on the one hand, she wants to leave. On the other hand, it's home because of the things that happened in her family, but she has to come to terms with the fact that she's back.
And that's her whole character growth. And book 1, that's essentially kind of what happens. Her sister dies in an accident. She's called to come home, and then she realizes that she must stay. And it's her reckoning with that, and her reconciling herself to the fact that she needs to stay, and actually can she. So I suppose book 3 is all about her process. It's like, can I build a life here? Can I stay here? And then after she finds a body under the garden, that doesn't help the situation.
No, definitely not. And I also always found it fascinating that Diana, who knew or knows both sisters, was constantly comparing them. And we always, or I as a reader always felt she was mourning the fact that Amy is no longer alive, and Izzy, until the end, doesn't live up to her expectations.
Or does it have to do with her being a teacher? That she's
maybe.
comparing them.
Maybe.
Possibly. I think when there are sisters, especially when there are just two or brothers as well, people are always going to compare them. And I think definitely there's something about your teachers. I had a favorite teacher at school, and I still have the feeling that I could never kind of meet almost her expectations of me. Her standards were so high, and that was probably just her way of encouraging. Because if you tell, I remember she once graded an exam paper of mine and gave me 98%, and she said, "You would have had 100, but I know that if I give you 100%, you'll stop working." So the 98% was to encourage you to push a little bit harder. And I thought, oh, that's so unfair to do that. You already said it was perfect. Yeah. But obviously now I can appreciate it. But yes, Diana is always comparing the two, and you're not supposed to have favorites. And I think she probably doesn't have favorites. She likes them both in different ways, and she probably feels a lot of sympathy for Izzy.
Would it be correct to say that all three characters, Izzy, Diana, and Kelly the victim, they all struggle with the past demons?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the circumstances that drove Kelly to be there, I mean, I think she'd been through a very hard time. And I think what Diana is going through, I wouldn't say Diana has had a particularly hard time, but she's obviously reflecting on a period. It's really hard to do this without giving away.
Yeah, I know.
She's reflecting on a time where she wasn't her best and could have done better. And she's wondering, did she let someone down? Did she fail someone? But I love as well that kind of during the course of the book, Diana is struggling with the early signs of dementia or memory loss or Alzheimer's. She doesn't know what it is, and she's being incredibly brave about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very British, stiff upper lip and everything.
Also, is this also a generational thing? The stiff upper lip?
Yes. I remember an older person in my family once telling me, she said, people keep talking today about they've got depression. We didn't have depression in mind. You just got on with things.
Yeah. On the one hand, yes. On the other hand, depression is nothing to take too lightly. I mean,
maybe it is.
Exactly.
It's one extreme in the past because it doesn't exist. The other extreme now because everything is a depression, but maybe it isn't, just people being down.
Maybe
somewhere in the middle would be best.
But I think it's probably a sign of progress, though, and also that we can talk about these things much more. I think probably in the past people just suffered in silence, a lot more, and far better that we can get help for things like depression, for example.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, absolutely. Since we mentioned village life or small town life, I always wonder, and it's also in the book, of course, that, and you said it yourself, I mean, it's lovely and so on, it's wonderful. And yet, at the same time, using village life for a setting also means, well, let's dig a little deeper. Let's see what's underneath the surface.
Yeah, I think a small village is a great setting for a murder mystery because you've got that kind of the claustrophobia almost. There's also that terrible gnawing feeling that somebody has done this, somebody in this village has done this terrible thing, and yet everybody on the surface appears so wonderful, and you know everyone personally. So it's someone in your kind of not your inner circle, but someone that you know firsthand has potentially done this awful thing, which must make it quite hard to go to sleep at night. I imagine you'd be locking all the doors and checking the windows twice. And I also love that because this is such a beautiful place, this region and this village, that I like the juxtaposition of such a beautiful landscape and such a picturesque village where all these terrible crimes are happening.
Is it more scary or
Sinister.
seems dangerous when you know that someone you know and trust is a murderer compared to a stranger?
I think so. I mean, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Those like crime fiction that's set in the big cities, the kind of the gritty like urban drama. It's a stranger. There are, we know there are monsters in big cities, and it's anonymous. But when it's someone close to you, and especially someone that you trust, I think that's far more frightening.
Mm-hmm. Even within the family. I mean, family settings are also very popular at the moment, and that's an even scarier thought. Yeah. In a place where you should feel safe, and yet you are not safe.
But usually in a small village, people feel safe.
Maybe they shouldn't. Yeah. Especially not in the English countryside. They shouldn't. No.
Very high murder rate.
If you believe all the fiction you read, you'd think there was a very high murder rate in the English countryside. I assure you there's not.
Oh yeah, we know. Don't you worry. I wouldn't say that France is safer, but like you said, I mean this contrast. It also reminds me, of course, a little bit of what Agatha Christie did with her Miss Marple. And I mean, Diana was also called Miss Marple.
Yeah.
Joke-wise in the book, but she always said that it's the whole world in a small setting. I mean, what people feel or what people think, it's not so different from the big city. I mean, human interaction doesn't vary that much.
It's kind of a microcosmos.
Yeah.
It's a microcosm, exactly. Yes, it's just you've got everything kind of like boiled right down. And I suppose for a writer, it's fewer characters, it's less fewer locations to remember and that sort of thing. And you can build up your characters, I suppose, more easily because they're always interacting and it's always the same. There's a smaller pool of suspects as well, of course, for a murder mystery.
But you also have in Sea Houses, you also have the tourists. It's not that small.
It's not completely closed, exactly. It's not completely closed, and there are even from a village, you if you go to high school, for example, the village is too small to have a high school, so the school is in a different town. So there are sort of extensions of the village, and it's not like they never leave. They go to it as well, and the story, I suppose, is bigger than the village, but really where the home is and where the core characters are, they're all, a daily feature of each other's lives.
Yeah. And since we already mentioned the Queen of Crime, do you have as a writer a role model?
I suppose, I read quite varied. I suppose probably if I had to pick a role model, do you guys know L.J. Ross?
Yep.
So when I was writing L.J. Ross is a prolific crime writer from the northeast of England as well. And when I started writing my first book in 2019, and I actually, sounds crazy, but she wasn't on my radar at that point. Mm-hmm. And I started to, I thought, I wonder if anyone else has written a crime novel set around this area. And of course, within seconds, I found out that somebody had. So I was reading her books as I was completing my first. Mm-hmm. I thankfully realized that they're very, very different. And I got to the end of the first draft, and that point where you think, okay, well, I can't believe I've actually finished. I've been trying to write a book for about 15 years. So to get to the finishing line, mm-hmm. An incredible feeling. But then you have like what's next question. And I'd never got far enough to look into it. And, I knew that you need to get an agent, and that can take a long time. And then your agent tries to get a publishing deal. And, the world tells you to expect a lot of rejections. You will hear no 100 times before you get the first yes. And I was thinking, I don't want to do that. I've done all the hard work. I've written the book. That's supposed to be the tough part. I don't want to go through this whole process. Mm-hmm. And I came across an interview with L.J. Ross at this point having read sort of 4 or 5 of her books, and she had independently published. Mm-hmm. And not only that, she'd created her own publishing house because she didn't want to give away the intellectual property, and she wanted to keep control of everything. And something about that really appealed to me. So I suppose in that way, she was very much a role model. Mm-hmm. And I love what she does in terms of inspiring and supporting new writers as well in the region.
Yeah,
that was a long-winded answer, L.J. Ross.
Yeah, that's what we heard from, I think it was Dr. Noir. She said that L.J. Ross is very supportive of writers.
Yes, Yes, as is Dr. Jackie Noah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also, I've heard a panel about using a established publisher or self-publishing. There are a lot of authors who choose a self-publishing route because they want to have the control and the rights and so on. So it's quite done quite often.
Definitely, to a certain personality type, that holds a huge amount of appeal.
Yeah. You said, since you are from the north of England and Elcher Ross is also from the north of England, who else have you discovered so far?
Trevor Wood.
Yep, Trevor Wood. Mm-hmm.
You know what? I read books on my Kindle. Maurice Whitaker as well, who's very much from Northumberland, not so far away from Sea Houses. I was going to say I read books on my Kindle, so I'm often reading a book, and by this point I've forgotten the title and the author kind of until I get to the end. I don't know if you ever have the same problem. You know, when you have a paperback, you see it every time.
Exactly. Every time you close it or pick it up, you see the title with the and the author's name. And if you read it on an ebook reader, you don't. And sometimes I have to check what's the title of the book I'm reading and the author. Because
me too.
Yeah, same here.
Lost.
Same here.
I'll tell people I'm reading this brilliant book. What's it called? I have no idea.
check.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I'm only asking because I was wondering if you are a member or part of the Northern Crime Writers.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. Because I think Trevor Wood was the founder of this group, of this community. And as a writer, and having written 3 books, and you switch between the past and the present in book number 3 a lot, are you a planner or a pantser or somewhere in the middle?
My first book, I plotted, and that worked very well. By the time when I started my second, I thought I have a rough idea of the story, and I know roughly like what the beats will be and when things will happen and kind of who will die. But I just decided to have a lot of fun with it, and I wrote it from multiple points of view and just switched the perspectives. And really, the story flowed. However, I got to the end, and it was too long. There were parts that didn't make sense, sort of threads left hanging and this sort of thing, and it was quite a nightmare to edit. So for the third, I plotted again, and I think this is my way forward, because at least then I have the structure. And even what I did with the third one, I had someone check the draft, and it's quite not the draft, the plan, and it's quite an extensive plan. It was probably a couple of thousand words itself, and I had someone go through and check that everything made sense. And even at that point, we found a couple of things that maybe didn't quite tie up into a neat little bow. So it was by the time I started drafting, it was all completely plotted out, and I knew exactly what was going to happen and when. And this is for me, this works better.
And in the third book, you also changed the point of view from one chapter to the next with the different characters. I think it makes it more compelling if you see the thoughts and the viewpoints of the different characters.
Yes, it's quite hard to tell an entire story from one person's point of view, because there will be so many things happening that they haven't seen or that they haven't been part of. I think as a writer as well, it's a nice little palate cleanser to change voices and almost give yourself a bit of a creative break, especially if it's a character like Izzy who's struggling a lot and going through some quite heavy stuff. To switch to Diana being very cheeky and plotting away, conspiring. But it was also super fun.
No, go on, please. No, go on.
I think it was also super interesting to write to go back in time and write the scenes from Kelly's point of view, because she was a teenager roughly around the same time that I was a teenager. So it was very much trying to think of those kind of early 2000s references and the things that we used to do, like the disposable cameras, the fake tan, the hair straighteners. It was fun to get those things in, even though what she was going through was quite harrowing.
I also wanted to ask you said changing point of view is one thing, but also you not only change the point of view, but also the person, because Kelly is written in first person. Everything else is written in third person. So which do you prefer, or does it not matter to you which person you write, first or third person?
I think when it's written in first person, it becomes much more, as the reader, you feel much closer to it.
Yeah.
And it can be, I think, especially for thrillers, that's why thrillers tend to be written thrillers written in, what are thrillers written in? I know, I was going to say about text. No, I think it brings you much closer to the narrative, and it makes it much more kind of emotional, as well as from the reader's point of view. Yeah, I'm not sure how much thought really went into that decision to have it in third person or first person. If I was just experimenting one day and kind of liked it.
And you said it was fun writing Kelly's perspective because you were the same age at the time. And how much did you have to research? Because sometimes we do remember wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I even remembered the layout of the village, the geography of the village incorrectly. But when I wrote the first book, I was on the other side of the world. It was COVID. I couldn't come back to visit. I relied a little bit on Google Maps, but I relied very much on my memory of the village, which was from childhood. And when you're a kid, you think everything's like bigger, it's further away. And then, when after the pandemic and after COVID, as soon as I went back, I was walking around thinking, I know I remembered this incorrectly, and it's not right in the book. I think though, as an author, you have a bit of license to change the geography of places to fit your narrative. I think that's fine to do. But there were some things I remembered in terms of like being a teenager in the early 2000s, and weirdly, and I probably can't even remember it now. I did remember correctly the minimum wage for the time.
Okay.
Probably because I earned it once upon a time. And then when the editor checked it, she came in and she confirmed. She's like, this was correct. And I said, I knew that would be right. But yeah, some of them, some elements, I guess, came from trawling Pinterest and reading blogs and things about the period.
And I mean, researching the past and getting things wrong. Did you get letters that said, "Oh no, that's completely wrong, madam"?
No, I didn't, which suggests that people are very forgiving. However, I used to work at a newspaper in Newcastle. We had the main newspaper is called the Evening Chronicle. And I wrote an article about a building that had been renovated and turned into something else. And I'd said it used to be the cinema, or it used to be the dance hall or something. It wasn't even the point of the article. It was kind of one line almost at the bottom. And like 9:05, the phone started ringing, and someone said, an old man said, "You got that wrong. I need to speak to Katherine Graham." They put me through, and he said, "You got that wrong. It used to be whatever." I said, "I'm very sorry about that. Either I remembered it incorrectly or what someone told me." And throughout the day, there were just a steady stream of callers and people phoning up the newspaper to tell me I was wrong.
Ooh.
So I learned a valuable lesson that day. It was mortifying.
But at least you knew how many people read the article.
Yes, which is not. It's a fun thing, but not when you've made a mistake in it.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Oh dear, another one, another one. And having written now book number 3, what about taking part in events like Harrogate, Bloody Scotland? Anything in the books?
So in Newcastle we have there's a festival. Actually, Dr. Noir she orchestrates a festival in
the library.
I think it will be in December.
Yeah, December. I think so. Yeah,
be in December this year. So I'm definitely looking forward to at least to going along and meeting some other authors.
You're not on a panel?
I haven't been asked yet.
We have to talk to her, definitely. It's a shame.
Put a word in for me.
Yeah, we will.
We've never actually met. I think we have a couple of friends in common, so I'm looking forward to finally meeting her.
Ah, see, she's fun. Absolute fun. Yeah. Very enthusiastic.
I've seen her speak on panels.
Yeah, and she was a moderator and so on. But otherwise, any other plans for any other events? Like I said, I mean, it's December.
I just remembered I am doing an event with Northumberland Libraries in October, which will be good fun. Because those will be the people who know that the geography in the books is not very interesting.
Yeah, and also with LG Ross there? Does she also appear in these events, or is she more in the background?
No, I think she's quite good. I mean, she has a significantly higher profile than me, so perhaps she gets invited to more events. But I saw LJ Ross speak at Durham Book Festival last year, which was a fantastic festival. I'll try to attend again this year. But they had some of my favourite writers there, including Lucy Foley.
Also very well known author by now. And may I ask, Katherine, what was the initial reason that started you writing?
Or spark.
Yeah, indeed. Crime fiction.
The initial idea is certainly, well, I suppose I read crime fiction, and as I said, I'd been trying to, I'd made several attempts at writing a novel over the past sort of 15 years or so. I can't even remember how long it's really, but for a very long time. And they were always crime fiction. Probably a little bit of what we'd call women's fiction as well. So very much kind of stories told from the female perspective and about the female experience. So I had the book I always wanted to write, and I sat down and finally, started writing it. And then I met up with a friend. So I was living in Taiwan at the time. My friend, it was a school friend. He was living in Singapore. I was in Singapore, and we got together one night, a school friend, and he also, we were at school together, and also he has a twin sister who was also at school with us. So the three of us were very good friends, and we were catching up and reminiscing. And he told me that his twin sister, who I'm also friendly with, had once confided in him that if anything happened to her, she'd notified him basically that if anything ever happened to her, he would inherit her 3 children. And at the time, he was working for, I don't know, like Google or Facebook, one of these big tech companies in Singapore, living a fabulous life. And he said, "My God, Katherine, can you imagine? All of a sudden, overnight, you've lost your sister and you've got 3 kids to look after." And I said, "Oh my God, yeah, that would be brutal, for want of a better word." And I started thinking, God, if that happened in my case, my sister also has 3 children, and I was thinking, well, I would have to move back home, and that kind of became that sort of sparked the kindling, at least, of the idea behind the first book. And then I thought, well, it would be the whole kind of the twist is that obviously the sister dies, and the Izzy soon suspects it probably wasn't an accident, and that's the crime.
But your friend's sister, she's still alive and well.
Just fine. She's alive and well, accounted for. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so is yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much.
Thank goodness for that.
No.
Is Singapore the foodie heaven I've heard it to be?
Yes, I think it is. I only went for a weekend, but I ate a lot in the weekend, I remember. But it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was sort of, I think, Chinese New Year 2020, so maybe February, and we were all just starting to get a little bit nervous about being in big hotels. There were no cases at the time, and then I think as we were checking out of the hotel, they said there had been a case of this new virus. It's terrifying when I think back to that period. Just that I think it's the heightened anxiety, but the heightened anxiety over a long period of time as well, which it's just exhausting.
Yeah.
And I threw myself into writing Salt Sisters, probably to distract myself a little bit from some of that. But I think definitely there's some of the heaviness and the sadness that I was feeling at the time comes through in the book. When I read it now, I think, oh my God, Katherine, you were down in the dumps.
But you got out of it. So
yeah, and
yes.
Do you think it's best to avoid the pandemic? Because one of our guests also had a pandemic, a different kind of pandemic in her book, but it was just a plot device to write about what happens after the pandemic. Do you think, should it be in the books? Should it not be in the books? There was also a discussion some while back.
Yeah, I've had this discussion a few times. I think if you're writing kind of realistic or like contemporary realistic fiction, you've got to at least refer to it, and it also gives it a time frame. And I'm sure, in years from now, we will all look back and say, well, was it before the pandemic or after the pandemic?
Because, like you said, before and after, like the war, supposedly.
Exactly. So I think we will all remember kind of our lives in terms of before the pandemic or afterwards. And I also think as well it will be incredibly dating on photos, because we'll see all the photos where people were wearing masks.
Yeah.
So I think we'll always remember, especially because a lot of us went through kind of big, life changes over the course of the 2 years. So I think for contemporary, if it's like fiction kind of anchored in the real world, you do need to at least mention the pandemic, because and as well that gives the time frame. Although I personally couldn't bear to write anything that happened during the pandemic, but I've read a couple of books where it was perhaps just the start of lockdown, and kind of that added to the confusion and the tension. This kind of strange new world idea.
Also, as a plot device, like we said, I mean, our guest the last time, it's just a plot device for other things. It might also be a good plot device, again, for crime fiction, because we had the lockdowns, and what happens? People being locked down in, I don't know, a small village in the English countryside, maybe? Who knows? No, let's not go there.
I read which it was possibly Adele Parks. Who knows? It was on a Kindle. She had a book that was used as a plot device, as in the person was being held somewhere, and because the rest of the city was being locked down, nobody found them for a while, and that's how that's how this person was able to kidnap someone.
Yeah, of course. Good idea, actually. Katherine, now having written 3 books, 3 mysteries, what would be your advice for any other aspiring crime fiction and mystery writer out there?
My advice is definitely to just make sure you finish. Just finish, because anything else can be fixed afterwards. But if you don't finish, you don't have a product to fix.
Yeah.
And fixing it, I mean, how long did it take you to fix it? I mean, some people say, I have to stop somewhere sometime because I keep on fixing.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, in terms of creative pursuits, it's almost the sort of the least satisfying, in that it will never be perfect. And you can always go back through and change again and change again. I think the key is to give yourself deadlines and say it absolutely must be done. And obviously, by the time you publish it, you really need to have it in the its final shape, let's say, by then. My second, like I said, I pantsed it, and that took a long time to fix. That was a lot of work as well, which is why I don't want to do it again. The third didn't take so long to fix and do all of the edits, because I'd planned it so well from the start. And also, I think by the third, I sort of knew what I was doing. I was a lot more at ease with the process, a lot more comfortable kind of writing as well.
Do you enjoy writing dialogue?
Yeah, I do. I think I often have a first pass through the manuscript where you're not really kind of putting on all the tags and stuff, and then go back through and kind of fix it later, because you don't want to slow down the flow of words. But I like being in that, like almost in that zone where you can hear the characters speaking, and kind of exactly what they would say and what they would sound like. So their words come more easily to me, I would say, than the kind of the descriptions and the tags. And you know what I mean by tags as well. You don't have to just say he said, she said. It's about he leaned forward and the chair creaked behind him, or I don't know, she licked her lips. The sort of the physical actions that people are doing while they're speaking.
So you flesh it out afterwards.
I find that part a little bit more difficult, so I do that afterwards. Yeah, let their words come first.
And let's suppose your books, or the last one, is taken up by a production company. Who is going to play Diana?
What's Michael Smith doing these days? I don't know. We've got a lot of very good British actresses. They would have to be able to probably do a little bit of a northeast accent, but or Judi Dench perhaps. I don't know. Aim high.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, why not? I mean, good choices. Either way.
And we have an expression. We have an expression in the northeast. Shy Ben's getting out, and it means that shy children don't get anything. So basically, if you don't ask, you won't get. So I would say Michael Smith or Judi Dench, and that's it.
Yep. Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, be bold. Why not?
Yep.
Absolutely.
If you don't ask, you won't get anything.
Yeah, exactly. And Katherine, what are your plans? What can your fans look forward to?
So my readers do keep asking me for another book set in sea houses. I'm not sure I'm doing that. It's definitely not in my plan right now. It's a beautiful village. It's very small. I've already killed 7 people. I have quite a high body count. I'm thinking probably move to a different location. I finally finished the draft of the book I always wanted to write. It's crime fiction. It's set still in the Northeast, but in the mid 80s. And that was fun to research because obviously I can't remember a single thing about the mid 80s. And then I also had another idea, and this is the problem I think with for crime writers, that you will always kind of have ideas and sort of devious thoughts about dastardly things that people could or possibly have done. So I might attempt something that is set probably in Switzerland where I live, and that's that. I'm sort of in the very early stages of a draft on that. It's very strange, though, I think, when writers talk about a book that doesn't exist yet, when it's just an idea in their head, because it's almost like someone describing a dream. So I try not to get into it too much, but yeah, those are my plans.
As you said, the book's set in the mid 80s. How much of a difference did it make that there were no mobile phones around?
Oh, huge, because they had house phones, of course, which I do remember the period before mobile phones. But yes, it completely different in terms of the relationships as well between women and men, married couples, even the way that women were generally perceived and possibly sort of expected to do everything. Yeah, it was also for the people in the Northeast, that was a huge period of social upheaval. We had the miners' strike, which kind of defined our communities, largely for the next sort of 2 generations or so. Yeah. So it was set just after the miners' strike.
Okay, huge impact on society in the UK. Yeah, and is there anything you would never put in a book?
That would be quite a long list. Let's say I would definitely I would only ever write something that I would like to read, or something that I was comfortable reading. Perhaps that's a better way. That's a better way of putting it. And and I don't mind to be made to feel uncomfortable. I don't mind that feeling, because that's what we read crime fiction for. You want to feel like the fear and the tension. So absolutely, but I think in Salt Girl, I touch on some topics like it's child abuse and grooming. Yeah. So it's not that there are specific topics off limit. I think it's just probably how you approach them, and can you approach them sympathetically. But I definitely wouldn't write anything ever too gory or too brutal, too graphic.
Yeah, you didn't, because it's something you asked me, Teacup. Is it cozy? Is it bloody, or is it somewhere in the middle? I said it's not cozy, but it's also not too graphic for her. Not too graphic for her.
I just asked before I start reading.
Yeah, it's okay. But I mean, it's not a cozy crime either. I mean, although it's set in a small village, it's not, like you said, there are lots of topics which are like grooming and so on. They are not supposed to make people comfortable, but to take a closer look also in a small community who people really are.
Sometimes I think you have to speak about some things that happen. Yeah. You can't ignore them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think it's possibly a bit of a mashup of genres. To be honest, there's some elements that are firmly cozy, and then there are other parts that would fall more closely into other genres. And I think as well, when you publish independently, you have the freedom and the flexibility to do that. You see writers doing that successfully, kind of blending, like having a bit of romance, for example, in crime, whereas traditionally published, you would say never put romance into crime; they don't go together. So
Wouldn't say that, but
So that's how. Well, I ended up with an 84. One of my heroes, my protagonist, is an 84-year-old sort of want-to-be private detective. But we're also talking about child abuse and grooming.
Yeah. It's a good mixture. Absolutely. And you want to read on. Great book, by the way, Katherine.
Thank you.
Just telling the truth? Is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
I would actually just like to say to everyone, to appeal, I suppose, if you're considering, if you haven't been to Northumberland yet, make your way there. If you're considering a visit to the UK, definitely check it out, because it's a beautiful, very, very beautiful part of the world, and the people are wonderful, despite what my books might say.
No, they are. We have spoken to a few people from the region, and we absolutely agree. Only via Zoom, but still, we absolutely agree. Yeah,
good. Glad to hear it.
And we would love to visit. We would absolutely love to.
I'll give you the tour.
Yeah, great. We have to visit more than once, definitely.
At one point.
At one point, yes.
It's on a list for some time now.
Yep, absolutely. Teacup, any more questions for our guest? No, not from me either. Katherine, it was lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
It was lovely to meet you both. Thank you very much.
You did enjoy this episode as much as we did? Then hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. If you like to support us and buy us a coffee, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee and other platforms. You can find all the necessary links in the description. Until next time.